City Camping Fund 2016. You're already at the podium.
I'm here. This is just, we've got a little bit of an overage from collections, and so I would like to get this taken care of by the end of the year so we can add to everyone's cash balance going into the next. So that's all it is.
So on the agenda, there's an outline of an email that Amy sent to us earlier discussing the reason for this and the current situation with the funds. Anyone have any questions? Okay, no questions. This is going to be, Mrs. Kreitz, you'll be the second on this.
Yes, sir.
And we're looking at 3 readings?
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Next item is Resolution 14222. It's replacement of the 3 mil levy for construction, reconstruction, resurfacing, and repair of streets, roads, and bridges in the city. Coming out of Law Committee, Mrs. Kreitz.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to turn it over to Mayor Scheffler.
Yes, so the 3 mil levy for streets, which was passed in 2013, needs to be renewed in 2023. It expires at December 31st, 2023. So we are 9 years into that levy, and to date from that levy, we have collected $20,622,554. And with that, we've been able to invest $37,156,050 in street resurfacing of various kinds, and that includes $16,972,776 in state and federal grants, which would not have been available to us had we not had the 3 mil levy for the local match. Some of those grants have various match amounts from 5% to 26%. Some of them are 20%. So we've been able to leverage that 3 mil levy money into a lot of, almost double the amount to invest in our streets. Unfortunately, that doesn't mean that every street in town got repaved, because we have 184 miles of streets, and it's an expensive process to resurface a street. We've gone everywhere from full depth reclamation, where the street is dug out clear down to the dirt like Kanawha was, and some are just microsurfaced like Edie Road from the railroad tracks to Memorial Drive was this year, which prolongs the pavement. So the existing levy has produced a little over $2 million each year. So this would be a replacement, so would go back on the ballot as 3 mills, which would produce something more than that, because the millage isn't rolled back like it has been over the last 9 years. So it'll probably produce $2,350,000 or $2,400,000 going forward. And obviously the price of asphalt and any oil products have gone up significantly. So that's a welcome addition, so we can keep up with the same pace of paving that we've been accustomed to in the past.
Thank you, Mayor.
Any questions for the mayor? This is a replacement of the 10-year levy, and it'll go before the voters. So, who's your second on this?
It's going to be Ms. Tiener.
And 3 readings?
Yes.
Thank you. Next item on our agenda is Resolution 14322, a resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into contract with Verdantis for engineering services coming out of water, wastewater. Mr. James.
Thank you, Chairman McDaniel. I'd like to yield some time to Stephen Wellstead to discuss this.
Good evening, everybody. This legislation is a typical annual piece we submit every year around this time. We have a general contract, yearly annual contract with Verdantis. In this case, Verdantis, formerly Hull, formerly Jobs Henderson. For some of you who've been around a while may recognize those names. Just having around primarily for inspection services whenever they're needed, but also use it for any miscellaneous engineering that might be needed on any projects, water, wastewater, stormwater that's needed.
Anyone have any questions on that? Mr. Matlin, your second.
That's correct.
And
we're looking
3
at
readings?
Is that acceptable?
Yeah, 3 is perfectly fine, absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you. Next item on our agenda is Resolution 14422, a resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into contract with Ben Warner for inspection services. Also out of wastewater, Mr. James.
Once again, I'll yield some time to Stephen.
Thank you. So yeah, similar piece. We have an independent contractor, Ben Warner, whom we use for inspection services, again, on construction projects. He's been, throughout this entire year, he's been on the Lawrence Street project, the improvements going down on there. As always, doing a good job for us, making sure our interests are looked after down there. And this project's expected to go through the fall of this year. And again, we're going to keep him on that, and this piece and this contract will allow us to do that.
Any questions? Who's your second?
Ms. Teener will be, and there's also 3 readings.
3 readings. 3 readings on 14422. Next item we have on the agenda is 14522, a resolution to decrease appropriations in the water fund for water department employee overtime coming out of water wastewater. Mr. James.
Thank you again, Chairman McDaniel. I'd like to yield some time to Darren Drum, our superintendent, to give us a little idea of what this need is.
Yes, I'm looking for legislation to increase appropriations in our overtime. Excuse me a minute here. Yeah, these funds will come from the administrative salaries to the overtime account in the amount of $20,000. I'm currently on track to exceed my overtime budget this year. This transfer will augment overtime and leave sufficient funds in the administration for salaries through year end. The shortage came from 3 unforeseen resignations and 1 unexpected retirement.
Any questions for Mr. Drum? Your second is Mr. Menton.
Mr. Matt,
And what's your pleasure on?
and we're going to ask for suspension tonight.
Yes.
All right, asking for suspension on 14522. Next item on our agenda
Thank
is
you.
Resolution 14622, a resolution to decrease appropriations in the Department of Justice DOJ Equitable Sharing Fund 2048 for the purchase of 1 new cruiser for the Lancaster Police Department. It's coming out of finance. Chief Snyder is here to discuss that for us, where he was. There he is.
Thank you, Mr. Daniel. Thank you, members of council. This is for an decrease in our equitable sharing account, our 248 account. To give some background, it's a seizure account that we share and get funded by the DEA for assigning a member to the DEA task force, and any seizures that they get in those large-scale cases go into this account. So it's a revenue account. It's not a taxpayer-funded account. Basically, what we're asking for is, as you know, in the safety levy a couple years ago, we had promised the directed patrol unit, and in early this year, as the transition from the chief of police spot went from ex-chief Pilar to myself, we thought of ways to try to move that forward as quickly as we can and just do it sooner than later. This is the first step in that. We are starting a K-9 unit, worked directly with Commander Lowe in the Major Crimes Unit to get into a recovery plan grant with the Major Crimes Unit to have a K-9 unit fully purchased and funded at no cost to the taxpayer, or at least very, very, very minimal cost to the taxpayer. The reason for this decrease is, as you know, the shortage on cruisers is very prevalent nationwide. Right now, Ford is estimating cruisers to be backlogged up to 1 year. And what we've done as a department is assigned a team to go out and look for these cruisers on the lots of dealerships. We've located one in Pennsylvania that actually has a cruiser secured. We've not entered into any financial agreement with them, but they are holding the cruiser for us for potential purchase. The usage of this account was planned all along with the grant money. We were going to use money from this account, which was approved through the board at Major Crimes Unit, to purchase the vehicle and the vehicle outfitting. So all I'm really asking for is a reappropriation in that account to make those funds immediately accessible so we can go grab this car, start the K-9 unit immediately as soon as our officer is back from training.
Any questions questions for Chief Snyder? I had a couple, but you answered them all. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Mr. Ailes, will you be the second on that?
Yes.
And we're gonna ask for suspension so that this can be purchased as quickly as possible. The next item on the agenda is Resolution 14722, a resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into contract with Fairfield County General Health District for 2023, coming out of finance. Mayor Scheffler, can you speak about this for us?
Sure, this is just our annual renewal of the contract with Fairfield County Health Department. The narrative here says the amount is $364,000. It's actually $360,500, as we were able to get a correction in the amount based on what the health board passed. So it's an annual thing. Of the increase is 3% from last year, which, considering inflation and the way cost of things are going, seems pretty reasonable.
Anyone have any questions on that? That 2022 contract was $350,000.
Right.
All right. Mrs. Kreitz, will you be the second on that?
Yes, sir.
And 3 readings is good for that, Mayor?
Yes.
All right, thank you. The next item on the agenda is Resolution 14822, a resolution to request that the county auditor certify a tax valuation of the city and the amount of revenue that would be generated from replacement of the 3 mil levy for construction, reconstruction, resurfacing, and repair of streets, roads, bridges in the city. This is coming out of Law Committee. Mrs. Kreitz.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. This is the companion piece to the prior resolution, or the prior item that Mayor Scheffler spoke to. This just sends the item over to the county auditor and asks them to certify the amount that would be generated by that 3 mil levy.
Any question for Mrs. Kreitz? This is a step we have to certify this for the ballot issue.
Correct.
And who's your second on that?
That'll be Mr. Schoonover, and it'll have 3 readings.
3 readings on 14822. The next item on our agenda is Resolution 14922. This is the 2023 city budget. This is our first time to discuss the budget for 2023. All of you should have received the budget last Thursday in the mail from the mayor, along with some highlights of items that have changed significantly or changed, and the reason they may have changed. I'm going to have the mayor discuss briefly with you. Again, as we go through the budgeting process, please write down your questions if necessary. Contact the appropriate people. Usually it's going to be the mayor, but you might want to talk to a department head about some specific item if you have questions. And anything that I can answer or someone on finance can answer for you, we'll try. But going directly with the mayor would probably be the best advice I can give you. Mr. Mayor, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. So you all received the budget summary last week. However, for purposes of the viewers on TV, I'm going to kind of go through that as quickly as possible. I may skip a few of the details on here. So this is the first draft of the budget. We have always had an amended budget before we get to the third reading. I know that's going to be the case this year. I've already received some changes, including the allocation of general fund expenses to the enterprise departments, which was received from the outside auditing firm that does that allocation. It was only received this afternoon, so that will be at least one change that I'm aware of already. So wage adjustments, big question for everybody for this year. Safety forces will all receive a 5% increase, and that's per their collective bargaining agreement. AFSCME employees, the union employees, 4% increase per their collective bargaining agreement. Non-union employees, a 4% increase. Some employees are, based on their seniority, eligible for step increases, and they will receive that. Elected officials, per the ordinance passed 3 years ago, will receive a 2% increase. The Parks Department has adjustments in their budget similar to the adjustments we had last year. They had a Clemens Nelson study done, compensation study done, and they have adjusted their salaries to the numbers that Clemens Nelson came up with. Some increases were 4%, some were less, but it got everybody back in line, just like we did for the general city employees last year. The Parks Department has approved their budget. Health insurance premiums increased 2% over last year, which is an outstanding result compared to a lot of other cities that we've seen. Dental premiums actually decreased by 0.5%. The cost sharing continues at 85% for the city and 15% for the employees. Safety Forces budget this year for combined fire and police will be $28,445,000. The same budget for last year was $26,345,000, so an increase of about $2,100,000 in safety forces. About $2 million of that are one-time expenses in the police budget for replacing the defunct HVAC system in the police headquarters, for the engineering for that, and for the temporary air conditioning system that we'll have again next year until that is done. There are also some vehicles in the city police budget that won't be repeated. We have 2 new departments in the budget this year: GIS, which formerly was part of the IT department, and Planning and Zoning, which was formerly a part of building and the building department. Those are both broken out to address specific needs in our growing city. The Safety Forces chiefs have budgeted for full staffing levels for 2023, including 84 in fire, 75 for police. They're both still currently roughly about 10 below that strength, but hiring continues to be going pretty well. So we're making good progress, and we're probably up about 10 from a year ago from where we were. So we're looking forward to being at full staffed. Got that. There are 4 MORPSI interns included in the budget this year. They will be included. There's at least one department that didn't include the intern: 1 for Planning and Zoning, 1 for administration, 1 for GIS, and 1 for the tree commission. We had 2 interns last year, and the contribution they made to the city was significant. The general fund includes an increase in public transit support from $73,000 to $150,000. We are losing federal and state money because the local match isn't high enough, so this will help us capture additional federal and state grants. The county is also increasing their contribution. Previously, it has been $25,000, and I understand that their proposal for 2023 will be $175,000. So they're increasing from 25 to 175. We're also budgeting from the general fund an increase in community development to $150,000. There are some accounts in the budget that you'll see: 6019, 23, 25, 26, 29, and 6030. In the enterprise fund section that get budgeted after the end of the year because, and they're significant amounts, but they're not general expenditure funds. They're reserves typically required for bond covenants or something, and we wait until after the end of the year to get all of the interest income that is accrued to those accounts during the year. Other questions? Any questions?
Yes, any questions for the mayor? Again, this is the first go-round. I know you haven't necessarily had a chance to review every item. I sent the budget bridge to everyone this afternoon. Thank you, Treasurer Stoughton, for putting that together. It's much appreciated. But it'll allow you to look at the percentage of increase. They're highlighted there a little bit easier. Plus, it goes back a little bit further. I would also say that we have upcoming committee meetings in several of these areas where you can bring questions regarding that department's particular budget, and they can explain it to you in more detail. But again, email the mayor, set up a meeting if you'd like to go talk to him. He's told me he's gonna be available by phone, email, and in person. So take that opportunity should you have questions. But
Several of you came in last year and had sit-down meetings with your questions. I've already addressed questions via email to at least one council member who was right on the ball this weekend reviewing the budget.
so, any additional questions from Mayor Scheffler? All right, we also have Judge Fields here and his entourage. Judge Fields.
We got Judge Olive too.
Judge Fields and Judge
Judge Olive, come on now.
Let's go to discuss the risk report portion of the budget at this point.
And if you notice that I'm walking with a bad back, it's because I'm carrying him all the time. Didn't have this until he came on board, so.
You just old.
Yeah, that too. Thank you for having us. We have added or asked for an additional $50,000 in our budget. That is for our specialty dockets. Typically, we have run all of our specialty dockets on grant money. In July, we were in Nashville having breakfast, and I had a panic moment that what happens someday if they don't give us our grants? Because drug court's been running on grants for about 25 years, and now I have a mental health court, and I got a veterans court, as well as special abilities. Special abilities doesn't worry me because I do all that without grants. It's not a problem. So we haven't had a mental health grant for a while. We were making do on our budget. So we still had a couple of grants. Well, then at the end of September, those grants ran out and we were denied our joint grant with Patriot Court and Drug Court. So that's when I reached out to the county and I started laying some foundation with the city about what can we do. And at that point, I'm thinking, I need $250,000. Well, fortunately, Tamara Bartek, my grant writer and director of specialty dockets, met me in the garage one day when I got to work to show me that we got another grant. We did get a grant. It's over 4 years, and it's only for drug court. It does not include any of the other specialty dockets. So then I kind of curtailed what I was thinking. There's a $100,000 match that we have to get that grant. So my thought was then, if I could get the $100,000 match from the city and county, I could use the funds we generate, because we do generate funds, to cover everything in mental health court, veterans court, and the other courts, because that'd be $100,000 that I could work with. So we went to the county, and the county was very receptive, and they, of course, said, well, have you gone to the city? And I said, well, I'm going to, of course. And we met with them a couple of weeks ago, and they were receptive to $50,000. And so then that's what I would be asking the city for. And it's to keep those dockets running. They're very good dockets. If you've ever had an opportunity to see one, if you haven't, come see us. We'd love for you to come see what we do. I'm thinking of, again, if I can figure out financially how to do it, adding an adolescent docket, because we have a lot of people in front of us between 18 and 25 that haven't graduated high school, that are in trouble repeatedly, have a drug problem or a mental health problem. What I've been doing is I've been sticking them in my mental health court. What I would like to do is put them in their own court so that they could come see me every week. If you're not familiar with my docket, you come see me every week, and the average graduate comes every week, or they phase through the program, but their typical time on probation with me is over 500 days. It's not an easy program. It's about 1.5 years for you to graduate. And you're testing 3 times a week. You gradually go down to 2 times. You're reporting, you're going to counseling. We think they're effective. We think the recidivism rate is way down, especially for my Patriot, my veterans docket. I haven't had one yet that's gotten in trouble after they've graduated. I think it was just that transition in life that they needed from the military to the things that they saw, and also making them accept the help that they were entitled to. Because a lot of times they didn't want to go to the VA. I make them go to the VA or receive services. And none of those individuals have reoffended, knock on wood. But I would appreciate if you would consider giving us that $50,000 in conjunction with what the county's doing. And I'm not asking for it every year. We're still working all the grants that we can. We're submitting everything. And if we get grant money that will offset what we take from you, we'll give your money back. I mean, well, Randall won't, but I'll have a chat with him. He's in my ear up here telling me, no, he won't. I will, okay? So I would appreciate your consideration on that. Any questions with that part? Yes, sir.
So you didn't say how much the grant was for?
The grant was $750,000 over 4 years. We had a previous one, we actually had two previous ones. They reached about that over 3 years, and mental health had one, but they've dried up. And they always want us to add something new, and unfortunately, we're starting to run out of ideas. I tried to add the adolescent court to the mental health grant. They didn't buy it. We tried to add, we did, in the grant we got, we do have a grant for CrossFit. Our veterans will be going to CrossFit on a $4,000 grant so they can work out. I mean, it's keeping them busy and connecting them with each other. And they do, in the Veterans Court, they're connected. Those guys and those women, they defend everything with each other. They get on each other when they haven't done what they're supposed to do. But that grant's over 4 years, and that would be a $100,000 match that I have to have for $750,000. Okay? Anything else? Yes, sir.
Just real quick, is that a state or a federal?
Fed.
Federal?
Yep. We do get money from the state. I get $45,000 a year from OMAS for veterans.
45 for drug court, and 35 for mental health.
And that's from the state of Ohio, yeah. But the big money comes from the BJA and stuff like that. Okay.
Any other questions?
Now I'll introduce you to my cohort, the famous individual that you all know and love so very well.
Yes.
Randall Olam. I'm gonna sit down.
No, I just had one thing to say. I came up to take responsibility for a mistake I made. It looks like we'll have to make a slight adjustment to our budget because I'm going to have 2 people retire rather than 1. So everybody tells me they love working with me and they retire on me. So I don't know what that says, but many of you have worked with me for many years. Maybe you know the reason, but keep your comments to yourself if you would as to what you think they are.
I'm quickly learning.
So I just wanted to. We'll have to make that one adjustment. So, thank you.
Any questions for Judge Oldham?
Thank you. Thank you.
So again, this is our first pass at the city budget. Mr. Ailes, will you be the second on this? And we'll definitely have 3 readings on this one. All right, the next items we have are a series of pay ordinances, ordinance 33 through 4022. They involve the following groups of people: city management, professional personnel, city non-union personnel, municipal court management, professional personnel, municipal court, judicial and probation personnel, clerk of courts, IT administrator, city public transit personnel, the summer intern program, and parks and rec personnel. So, again, this is the introduction of these pay ordinances for 2023. Mayor Scheffler, could you give us some highlights on I think you may have discussed it primarily already in the budget.
I mentioned all the increases which are included in the pay ordinance, and, I'm not sure what else to
Yeah,
say.
there's a few other groups in here that the mayor didn't discuss, but if you recall, we had, Clemens Nelson did the study for us and for the parks, didn't they?
Yeah, the
So-
parks was in 2022, the cities was in 2021.
So in 2021, we made significant adjustments to some of our non-union personnel, and we did a study that clarified positions, explained job titles and duties, and then recommended the appropriate compensation for those positions. So that's where you'll see, if you look back a few years, you'll see an increase, and that's where that increase came from. We were probably quite low in some areas and needed to adjust. Do you have something, Director?
Yes, just to remind you that this is the first year that we've had a parks ordinance before council, and just want to bring that note. That's been a request, actually started with our auditor Nettles request and been through a lot of discussion, not only the Clemens Nelson study, but this is our first year for that, so it makes it a good document going forward for the future.
Yeah, and I must say, having worked for Parks, you may or may not know this, but their compensation package was significantly different than other areas of the city, and it really needed to be adjusted. And that's what this study did, and that's why the Park Board is making this recommendation. So, Mrs. Kreitz, you would be the second on each of these pay ordinances.
Yes.
And we're looking at 3 readings. Anyone have questions on the pay ordinances? And if you do, they would also be directed to the mayor as part of the budget discussion. Anyone? All right. Next item on the agenda, ordinance 4122, an ordinance to amend Part 9, Streets, Utilities, Public Service, Title 3, 5, Utilities, Chapter 911, Water, Section 91107D, capacity charge for water of the codified ordinances of the city of Lancaster and declare an emergency. This is coming out of water, wastewater. Mr. James?
Thank you, Chairman McDaniel. We don't read that again. I didn't get all that.
Yeah, I'll read that one.
We're good. I'd like to invite Mr. Denise Cruz to the podium to give us a little explanation of why we need to do this.
Good evening. It's my fault. When I prepared the last ordinance, I was not completely here, and I didn't have the numbers for the fire lines, and I had intended to do a substitute piece and put the fire line numbers in, and I went on vacation and then got wrapped up in the rate discussions that were going on, and it just slipped through the cracks. So this is my fault. But what we need to do is add the increase for the fire lines only. Fire lines are lines that go into commercial buildings that just operate their fire suppression systems, so their sprinkler systems. A lot of times they come in through a larger meter, and then the meter and then the line is divided off. So these numbers were developed by Red Oak, the same as the rate study, and I think I had given them to you before in the rate study. I just didn't get them in the ordinance.
Any questions for Denise? Thank you.
I apologize.
Who's your second?
Mr. Matlin will be my second. We're going to ask for 2 readings on this.
2 readings on 41-22. Departmental updates. Do we have any departmental updates? All right, thank you.
So we have someone
Oh, we do
coming up.
have someone. Oh, I see him coming up.
Good evening. I'll be quick. Mitch Nolan resigned from the city, and the mayor and Paul offered me the city engineering position, which I gladly accepted. I think maybe November 1st was Mitch's last day, and my first day was November 2nd. So I'm happy to continue to work with the city. I've been here for 6 years. Prior to that, I was with consulting firms for 18 years doing design work, municipal, private, transportation. The 6 years that I've been here, I've worked hand in hand with Mitch. He, half of the time I was doing projects with the 3 mil money, which I really enjoyed, and the other half I was kind of shadowing Mitch. And I mean, you guys probably all know this, but I want to give the update here. I'll just do my little pitch for the 3 mil money. I'm proud of what we've done with that money and how we've leveraged that to get as many of these streets as we can paved, and it's hard for me to imagine the next 10 years, and I hope to be here that entire time without having that levee replaced so that we can continue to make this town better. First order of business right now is we've got to hire an assistant city engineer, so I've got to fill my position. So this is another plug for everyone that we need to fill that position. We've got a lot of things going on, the private development. We're getting all kinds of plans and things in. I know Stephen Wellstead also looking for another engineer. We're different departments, but we're all right there in the same building, so we're all kind of working together as a team. So if we can get some of these positions filled, then we can continue to keep pace. That's all I have. Thank you.
So I'd like to call Greg Hintz up here as well, and I want you to know that I'm very proud of Kurt taking this position. The mayor and I have total confidence in him. it's funny, he'll ask me every week, how long is my probation, how am I doing? And we've only got a couple weeks into it. But Kurt's a very smart man. We're happy for Mitch and his new adventure with the county engineer. He'll still have a great impact for the city, but the change was very appealing to him for many reasons. So we're grateful for him coming up, and he's worked very well with this 3 mil levy, as well as you have, Superintendent Hens, and just appreciate that support as we get an opportunity to get this before the taxpayer. We know it's a replacement, but I think we made a tremendous difference, and I'd love for you to address that publicly.
Yes, we have. Like Kurt, proud of what we got done. We've kept our oversight costs down. Our inspection costs have been minimal compared to a lot of the way other cities run their programs. I don't have those numbers in front of me, but we have covered a lot of area in the city. I wished it could have been everything, but since he called me up here, I guess I can give you a few numbers on where we've ended up. So the majority of our alleys are chip seal. We've covered all of our alleys once and some of them twice. Our SIP program, which is a street improvement project, the 3 mil levy, we've put basically 32.5 miles of pavement down. Our STP, which is our federal money allocation that we get yearly, is about 7 miles. Our UPP, our urban paving program, which is through ODOT, that's all the state route paving that gets done. That hasn't been done since 14, but that's about 12.5 miles. We do have, all of these numbers that I'm throwing out there has 3 mil money attached to it somehow. A lot of it's match monies. LDOT, we've actually done about 9.5 miles overall through the whole program. Our OPWC, which is where we've gotten Quarry Road, Kanawha, some of those projects, the full depth reclamations, it's a lot of money, but you don't get a lot of mileage out of it. But 3 miles there, and everything's been crack sealed. We've got about 67 miles of crack seal out there. So we've done the work. I just hope that it's good enough for the citizens to give us another 10-year go-round. So,
Anita's still there. One thing that we've used is, and some of you are aware, we get an assessment of our roads maybe every 4 or 5 years of pavement study, and we let that report tell us. It's a very interesting study as they drive through all the streets, give us a pavement report, and so our decisions are based off of that. I don't think there's any year that we've covered all what we call red that are critical. Every year, we always have more streets to do.
And part of the problem is the streets that we started out with back in 14 are to the point now where they're starting to require some serious maintenance. This isn't a one and done. It's a revolving wheel. It's just constantly going around in circles, and we can only go so far with the money we have. And the inflation last year and a half, the inflation's hit us pretty hard as far as what we're able to do. I'm hearing rattlings in the pipeline that asphalt's going to go up another 20% next year. So, that's just, the higher that goes, the higher that climbs, the less money we have to put on the streets, But I think we've done our share of efficiency, moving forward, and I think we've made a huge impact in the quality of the drive that you people take every day. So,
Thank you for that report. Greg Henson planning on retiring first part of next year. And so this is something that he and I and the mayor have talked about. We're really proud of what we've accomplished, but we have a lot more streets to pave. Some residential streets have not been touched for 40 years on pavement. We got some more work to do. I'm grateful. I'm anticipating you passing that on to the taxpayer to make their vote, in the spring for that election. But we're grateful for that support of the taxpayers right now, and we'll continue to be good stewards of this funds if they give us those funds for the next 10 years. Thank you.
Anything for Mr. Hens before he sits down? All right,
Thank you.
Mayor.
One quick announcement. I think many of you know so far that the Parks Board announced on Friday that Steve Gayfield will be returning as the new superintendent of parks effective December 19th, and he will be living in the house at the corner of North High and East Fair Avenue. He is a welcome addition back to the city, and many people are looking forward to his return.
Thank you. Any other departmental updates? Yes, ma'am.
I know everybody else is looking forward to 2023, but I'm still living in 2022, so I'll be bringing in the annual legislation piece next council meeting to do the 2022 budget cleanup piece. It's an annual piece that I just do the one, and I'm working with, I've got a few more departments I'm working with to kind of clean up and bring their expense budgets in line to their actual cash. So, just
thank you.
letting you know that.
All right, one last go-round. Any other departmental updates? No one sneaking up on me? All right, great. I will pass it on to President Ohl for tonight's meeting prep.
Thank you very much. We just have one ordinance left, 4222, an ordinance to release a right-of-way and easement coming through Public Works. Mr. Schoonover. You know about this?
Yes.
Okay.
I didn't earlier, and I do now. So, it's part of the development on South Broad Street where the Dollar General is going, so it's a easement that we don't currently use, so I've been made aware that we can just ask for suspension on this to get that development moving forward.
Very good. And who's your second?
Yep.
I will
Mr.
be the
James.
second.
Mr. James will second. We will ask for suspension tonight on 4222. That's all for meeting prep. We'll toss it back to the chairman.
All right, do we have any other items for finance? Any other items for finance? All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make that motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, all in favor?
Yes.
Yes. All right, we are adjourned.
The regular meeting of Lancaster City Council will begin at 6:50.
You walked down the aisle and promised happily ever after. Sometimes happily ever after means ending a relationship. We know the conversations are not easy. Deciding what's best for you, your children, and your next steps takes work and communication. At Dagger Law, we know there are no monsters in a divorce, only people trying to find their way. Local, trusted, experienced. Dagger Law.
The Frankie Smith Funeral Home and Crematory in Lancaster and the Johnson Smith Funeral Home in Baltimore have a long and wonderful history of serving our community. Feel free to give us a call at 740-653-0652. Stop in and see us at either of our two locations, 405 North Columbus Street in Lancaster and 207 South Main Street in Baltimore. Respect for tradition, regard for change.
Good evening. Welcome to Lancaster City Council. Please join me in a word of prayer. Father, we're thankful for today, for your many blessings. As we work our way through and to Thanksgiving, we ask that you would continue to be with us. We are thankful for your many, many blessings. We ask that you would continue to guide and direct us in our work here tonight. In Jesus' name, amen. I hereby call this meeting of Lancaster City Council to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers? Here. Mr. Ailes?
Here.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Here.
Mr. James?
Here.
Mr. Matlin?
Here.
Mr. McDaniel?
Here.
Mr. Schoonover?
Here.
Ms. Sitterly?
Here.
Mrs. Teener?
Oh, you missed me. Yeah, that
Mrs. Teener, and she's not here.
She's not here. Let the record reflect the 8 of 9 members of City Council are in attendance this evening. Mr. McDaniel.
Yeah, Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that the council excuse Mrs. Teener from tonight's meeting.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to excuse Ms. Teener. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Reading and disposing of the journal.
I'd like to present the regular meeting minutes dated October 24th, 2022.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the journal.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive and file the journal. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Reports of city officials.
Email dated November 4th, 2022 regarding code enforcement meeting agenda submitted by Mr. Ayers. Email dated November 7th, 2022 regarding pay ordinances 2023 submitted by Mr. Ailes. Email dated November 13th, 2022 regarding finance agenda submitted by Mr. McDaniel. Email dated November 14th, 2022 regarding economic development minutes submitted by, I think that was the agenda. Bear with me just one second. I don't want to read the wrong thing into the minutes. Agenda, meeting agenda. Apologize. Submitted by Mr. Ailes. And finally, an email dated November 14th, 2022 regarding economic development meeting agenda. There, I did it again. I've got a duplicate there. I apologize. So there's only 4 communications.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the reports of city officials.
Second.
Motion and a second to receive and file reports of city officials. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Are there any communications?
There are none to be presented.
We have no special presentations or awards this evening. Are there any petitions or memorials?
There are none to be presented.
During this time, City Council sets time aside to allow the voters and taxpayers of the city to address City Council on any item or issue they would like. Is there anyone who would like to address Lancaster City Council this evening? Well, seeing none, we thank each of you for being here tonight. Reports of standing committees.
Public Works Committee meeting minutes dated October 14th, 2022, submitted by Mr. Schoonover. Law Committee meeting minutes dated November 2nd, 2022, submitted by Mrs. Kreitz. Code Enforcement and Zoning Committee meeting minutes dated November 7th, 2022, submitted by Mr. Ayers. Water Pollution Control meeting minutes dated November 9th, 2022, submitted by Mr. James. Finance Committee meeting minutes dated November 14th, 2022, submitted by Mr. McDaniel. And finally, the Safety Committee meeting minutes dated November 14th, 2022, submitted by Mr. Matlin.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the reports of standing committees.
Second.
Motion and a second to receive and file reports of standing committees. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. The reports of special committees.
There are none to be presented.
We have no public hearings this evening, so we'll move to the reading of resolutions with the second reading of temporary resolution 136-22.
A resolution to appropriate from the unencumbered balance and to amend the certificate of appropriations with the county auditor and the Parks and Recreation Fund 2012 to cover payroll for the remainder of 2022, offered by Ms. Sitterly and seconded by Mr. Matlin.
Ms. Sitterly.
Just a reminder, last meeting, this is essentially replacing a contract employee with a part-time employee, second reading.
Second reading on temporary resolution 136-22. Temporary resolution 137-22.
A resolution authorizing the mayor to prepare and submit an application to participate in the Ohio Water Development Agency program and to execute contracts as required and declaring an emergency, offered by Ms. Sitterly and seconded by Mrs. Kreitz.
Mrs. Sitterly.
Second reading.
Second reading on temporary resolution 137-22. Temporary resolution 138-22.
A resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to advertise for bids for the transfer station replacement project and declaring an emergency, offered by Ms. Sitterly and seconded by Mr. Mallon.
Ms. Sitterly?
Second reading.
Second reading on temporary resolution 138-22. Temporary resolution 140-22.
A resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to advertise for bids and contract for mowing and other landscape maintenance services for the city cemeteries, offered by Mr. Schoonover and seconded by Mr. James.
Mr. Schoonover?
Second reading, please.
Second reading on temporary resolution 140-22. We're now first reading on a series of resolutions, beginning with temporary resolution 141-22.
A resolution to appropriate from the unencumbered balance, increase receipts, and to amend the certificate of other sources and appropriations with the county auditor in the city income tax fund 2016, offered by Mr. McDaniel and seconded by Ms. Kreitz.
Mr. McDaniel?
First of three readings.
First of three readings on temporary resolution 141-22, temporary resolution 142-22.
A resolution to submit to the electors of the city the question of a replacement levy at a rate not to exceed 3 mills for purpose of general construction, reconstruction, resurfacing, and repair streets, roads, and bridges in the city and to declare an emergency, offered by Mrs. Kreitz and seconded by Mrs. Tiner.
Mrs. Kreitz?
First of three readings.
First of three readings on temporary resolution 142-22, temporary resolution 143-22.
A resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into a contract with Verdantis for engineering services, offered by Mr. James and seconded by Mr. Matlin.
Mr. James?
First of three readings, thank you.
First of three readings on temporary resolution 143-22, temporary resolution 144-22.
A resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into a contract with Ben Warner for inspection services, offered by Mr. James and seconded by Ms. Tiner.
Mr. James?
First of three readings.
First of three readings on temporary resolution 144-22, temporary resolution 145-22.
A resolution to increase and decrease appropriations in the Water Fund 6003 for the Water Department employee overtime, offered by Mr. James and seconded by Mr. Matlin.
Let me point out, Mr. James, that we're on a roll here.
We are on a roll. Thank you, President Noel. At this time, I'd like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary resolution numbered 145-22.
Second.
I don't think you caught my drift.
I did. I did.
Suspended anyway. Yes, indeed. We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary resolution 145-22. Mr. James.
Just briefly, in our Finance Committee meeting, Superintendent Drum indicated that they had some unanticipated resignations and one other retirement they had not anticipated, so he has to transfer some money into his overtime account.
Thank you very much. Further discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Sitterly?
Yes.
Motion to suspend carries 8-0. Mr. James.
Thank you again, President Newell. At this time, I'd like to make a motion that council pass and grace and enter upon a written record temporary resolution numbered 145-22.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 145-22. Discussion, Mr. James?
Nothing further, thank you.
Discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Ms. Sitterly?
Yes.
Temporary resolution 145-22 passes 8-0. Temporary resolution 146-22.
A resolution to increase and decrease appropriations in the Department of Justice Equitable Sharing Fund 2048 for the purchase of one new cruiser for Lancaster Police Department, offered by Mr. McDaniel and seconded by Mr. Ailes.
Mr. McDaniel.
Yes, Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third reading of resolution temporary numbered 14622.
Second. We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary resolution 146-22. Discussion, Mr. McDaniel.
I'll save it.
Discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Ms. Sitterly?
Yes.
Motion to suspend carries 8-0. Mr. McDaniel.
Yes, Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record resolution temporary numbered 14622.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 146-22. Discussion, Mr. McDaniel.
Yes, Mr. President, as Chief Snyder explained during the Finance Committee meeting, this is an opportunity to purchase a vehicle for the Lancaster Police Department. It is currently sitting on a dealership lot in Pennsylvania. The money that will be used for this is coming from the Equitable Sharing Fund, which is a money that we receive as participants in the Major Crimes Unit. That's it.
Okay, very good, thank you. Further discussion on the motion to pass? Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Ms. Sitterly?
Yes.
Temporary Resolution 146-22 passes 8-0. Temporary Resolution 147-22.
A resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract with the Fairfield County General Health District for public health services, offered by Mr. McDaniel, and seconded by Mrs. Kreitz.
Mr. McDaniel.
First of three readings.
First of three readings on Temporary Resolution 147-22. Temporary Resolution 148-22.
A resolution to submit to the Fairfield County Auditor a request to certify the total current tax valuation of the city and dollar amount of revenue that would be generated from a replacement levy of 3 mills for the purposes of providing funds for general construction, reconstruction, resurfacing, and repair of street, roads, and bridges in the city and declaring an emergency, offered by Mrs. Kreitz, seconded by Mr. Schoonover.
Mrs. Kreitz.
Yes, first of three readings.
First of three readings on Temporary Resolution 148-22. Temporary Resolution 149-22.
A resolution to make appropriations for current 2023 budget expenses and other expenditures of the city of Lancaster, state of Ohio for the fiscal year 2023, and to establish line item transfer authorities for departments, offered by Mr. McDaniel and seconded by Mr. Ailes.
Mr. McDaniel.
First of three readings.
First of three readings on Temporary Resolution 149-22. Are there any further ordinances to come before Lancaster City Council? Any further resolutions? We got a bunch of ordinances. Any other resolutions? If not, we'll move to ordinances, beginning with the second reading of Temporary Ordinance 30-22.
An ordinance providing for the issuance and sale of revenue notes in the aggregate principal amount of $893,682.40 to pay cost of improving Edie Road, Memorial Drive, and Michael's Way by grading, widening, paving, curbing, and improving bridges and railroad crossings, relocating utilities and installing sidewalk traffic signals and signs, and water, sanitary, and stormwater lines in facilities together with all necessary purposes thereto, and declaring an emergency, offered by Mr. McDaniel and seconded by Mrs. Kreitz.
Mr. McDaniel.
Yes, Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion the council suspend its rules and waive the third reading of temporary ordinance 3022.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the third reading of Temporary Ordinance 30-22. Discussion, Mr. McDaniel.
I'll save it.
Discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Ms. Sitterly?
Yes.
Motion to suspend carries 8-0. Mr. McDaniel.
Yes, Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion the council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record ordinance temporarily numbered 3022.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record Temporary Ordinance 30-22. Discussion, Mr. McDaniel.
Yes, Mr. President. Ordinance 3022 and 3122 both are related to the Edie Road TIF. These are the notes that we carry forward each year. It's an annual piece until the TIF ultimately pays off its obligations.
Thank you very much. Further discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Ms. Sitterly?
Yes.
Temporary Ordinance 30-22 passes 8-0. Temporary Ordinance 31-22.
An ordinance providing for the issuance and sale of revenue note in the aggregate principal amount of $277,201.56 to reimburse Flagstar Bank FSB for a draw on a letter of credit in connection with cost of improving Edie Road, Memorial Drive, and Miss Michael's Way by grading, widening, paving, curbing, and improving bridges and railroad crossings, relocating utilities and installing sidewalks, traffic signals and signs, and water, sanitary and stormwater lines and facilities together with all necessary purposes thereto, and declaring an emergency, offered by Mr. McDaniel and seconded by Mrs. Kreitz.
Mr. McDaniel.
Yes, Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion the council suspend its rules and waive the third reading of ordinance temporarily numbered 31-22.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the third reading of Temporary Ordinance 31-22. Discussion, Mr. McDaniel.
Nothing further.
Discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes? Yes. Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Ms. Sitterly?
Yes.
Motion to suspend carries 8-0. Mr. McDaniel.
Yes, Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record ordinance temporarily numbered 31-22.
Second?
A motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary ordinance 31-22. Discussion, Mr. McDaniel.
As stated previously, this is the second ordinance involving the E Road TIF and the notes that we are obligated to pay.
Thank you very much. Further discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And get the rest of that out of there. And Ms. Sitterly?
Yes.
Temporary ordinance 31-22 passes 8-0. Temporary ordinance 32-22.
An ordinance amending the zoning map subject to passage of the annexation of 20.611 plus minus acres in Greenfield Township and to declare an emergency. Offered by Mr. McDaniel and seconded by Mr. Schoonover.
Mr. McDaniel.
Yes, this is the second of three readings, and we have a public hearing set for Monday, the 28th at 6:30 PM.
Very good. Second of three readings on temporary ordinance 32-22. We now have first reading on a series of resolutions, beginning with temporary ordinance 33-22.
An ordinance to establish the benefits, titles, and compensation for management professional personnel employed by the city of Lancaster, Ohio for the year 2023 and to declare an emergency. Offered by Mr. McDaniel and seconded by Mrs. Kreitz.
Mr. McDaniel.
First of three readings.
First of three readings on temporary ordinance 33-22, temporary ordinance 34-22.
An ordinance to establish benefits, titles, and compensation for those employees who are not members of the recognized bargaining units employed by the city of Lancaster, Ohio for the year 2023 and to declare an emergency. Offered by Mr. McDaniel and seconded by Mrs. Kreitz.
Mr. McDaniel.
First of three readings.
First of three readings on temporary ordinance 34-22, temporary ordinance 35-22.
An ordinance to establish the benefits, titles, and compensation for Fairfield County Municipal Court management and professional personnel employed by the city of Lancaster, Ohio for the year 2023 and to declare an emergency. Offered by Mr. McDaniel, seconded by Mrs. Kreitz.
Mr. McDaniel.
Again, first of three readings.
First of three readings on temporary ordinance 35-22, temporary ordinance 36-22.
An ordinance to establish benefits, titles, and compensation for Fairfield County Municipal Court judicial and probation personnel employed by the city of Lancaster, Ohio for the year 2023 and to declare an emergency. Offered by Mr. McDaniel and seconded by Mrs. Kreitz.
Mr. McDaniel.
First of three readings.
First of three readings on temporary ordinance 36-22, temporary ordinance 37-22.
An ordinance to establish the benefits, titles, and compensation for Information Technology Administrator, Office of the Clerk of Court, employed by the city of Lancaster, Ohio, commencing the first pay period of 2023 and to declare an emergency. Offered by Mr. McDaniel, seconded by Mrs. Kreitz.
Mr. McDaniel.
First of three readings.
First of three readings on temporary ordinance 37-22, temporary ordinance 38-22.
An ordinance to establish benefits, titles, and compensation for transit personnel employed by the city of Lancaster, Ohio for the year 2023 and to declare an emergency. Offered by Mr. McDaniel and seconded by Mrs. Kreitz.
Mr. McDaniel.
First of three readings.
First of three readings on temporary ordinance 38-22, temporary ordinance 39-22.
An ordinance to establish the benefits, titles, and compensation for seasonal interns employed by the city of Lancaster, Ohio, commencing during the summer of 2023 and to declare an emergency. Offered by Mr. McDaniel and seconded by Mrs. Kreitz.
Mr. McDaniel.
First of three readings.
First of three readings on temporary ordinance 39-22, temporary ordinance 40-22.
An ordinance to establish benefit, titles, and compensation for parks and recreation personnel employed by the city of Lancaster, Ohio for the year 2023 and to declare an emergency. Offered by Mr. McDaniel and seconded by Mrs. Kreitz.
Mr. McDaniel.
First of three.
First of three readings on temporary ordinance 40-22, temporary ordinance 41-22.
An ordinance to amend Part 9, Streets, Utilities, and Public Services, Title 3, Public Utilities, Chapter 911, Water, Section 911.07D, Capacity Charge for Water of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Lancaster and to declare an emergency. Offered by Mr. James and seconded by Mr. Matlin.
Mr. James.
First of two readings.
First of two readings on temporary ordinance 41-22, temporary ordinance 42-22.
An ordinance to authorize the release of right-of-way easement on Fairfield County tax parcel 0535027600 and to declare an emergency. Offered by Mr. Schoonover and seconded by Mr. James.
Mr. Schoonover.
Sorry, Mr. President, but I'd like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third readings of temporary ordinance 42-22.
And I will second that motion.
I wondered, I thought maybe you were just gonna let it lay out there.
No.
No, we'll get her done.
I was gonna hang them out to dry. It's not a problem.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary ordinance 42-22. Mr. Schoonover.
Just real quick, we're asking for suspensions, more of a housekeeping piece on the release of this right away so they can continue to develop the South Broad Street section where we're gonna put a new Dollar General.
Very good. Further discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Mallon?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Ms. Sitterly?
Yes.
Motion to suspend carries 8-0. Mr. Schoonover.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary ordinance 42-22.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary ordinance 42-22. Discussion, Mr. Schoonover.
No thanks.
Discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Mallon?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Ms. Sitterly?
Yes.
Temporary ordinance 42-22 passes 8-0. Are there any further ordinances to come before Lancaster City Council this evening? If not, does anyone have any, well, we have no tabled legislation. Does anyone have unfinished business? Does anyone have new business? The clerk has asked me to ask each one of you to consider your committee meeting dates for 2023 as chairpersons of each of your respective committees, and to begin to get those to her as soon as possible so they can all get posted out on the city website prior to the beginning of the year. And so as you think through that, please just send your dates on to her. Further new business? We'll ask that the clerk please read our announcement of scheduled meetings.
The next regular meeting of council is November 28th at 6:30 PM. At that time, we will have a public hearing on temporary ordinance 32-22. The meeting following is December 12th at 6:30 PM here in council chambers. Upcoming committee meetings for the next 30 days. Finance, November 14th, 6 PM here in council chambers. Economic Development, November 17th at 7:30 AM at the 1897 conference room. IT Telecom, November 18th at 8 AM at the 1897 conference room. Finance, November 28th at 6 PM in council chambers. Service, December 2nd at 7:30 AM at the 1897 conference room. Public Works, December 9th at 7:30 AM at the 1897 conference room. Finance, December 12th at 6 PM here in council chambers. And I might as well read the last two. Water Pollution, December 14th at 8:30 AM at the 1897 conference room. And the last meeting of the year of committee is IT Telecom, December 16th at 8 AM at the 1897 conference room.
Thank you very much. Are there any bills?
There are none to be approved. Oh, yes, there are. I just realized I read there was a meeting tonight on there.
Yeah, we weren't gonna do it again.
Okay, there are two bills. MNCO, $174.25 for publication of legislation, and MNCO for $120.30 for publication of a notice of a public hearing, for a total payment to PNC, $294.55.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to pay the bills.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pay the bills. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Is there a need for an executive session? If not, a motion to adjourn is in order.
Mr. President, I'd like to make that motion, we adjourn.
Second.
A motion and a second to adjourn the meeting. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. May you and yours all have a very happy Thanksgiving. We won't be back together until after the holidays, so we'll look forward to seeing you on the 28th. Please remember to sign your legislation. We are adjourned.